Has anyone heard from Laurel? Is she on her way?
I think she may be in a different room. We may have followed a different link. I'm going to try to get hold of her.
Well, I think we should get started because we're on a tight timeline, and Laurel will join hopefully very soon. So I call the special meeting of the Eugene School Board to order on Wednesday, May 25th, 2022 at 5:32 p.m. We have board members Michelle Hsu, Kirthi Hasija Kaufman, Maya Rabasa, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Gordon Lafer, present, and we're expecting board member Laurel O'Rourke shortly. I just would like to start by reading a very short statement. It's been a very challenging several days. I know we are all feeling shaken to the core and experiencing our individual and collective sorrow, grief, and trauma following the news of the shooting at Robb Elementary School in Texas, where 19 second to fourth graders and 2 teachers were shot and killed. This tragedy came on the heels of the shooting in a Black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York, and a shooting in a Presbyterian church in Orange County, California. I don't even know how to adequately acknowledge the pain and trauma the families, friends, and community surrounding these children and teachers must be experiencing. This violence and these senseless shootings must stop. We need to come together and figure out how to protect our children and our community members. These are all precious lives. I would like to just take 2 minutes of silence to being here together to remember and honor these lives and send our healing and comfort from our community to their community.
Hey, Judy. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Judy.
So we have 2 items of business
Judy,
tonight to do before we go into the office.
Can I?
And I'm going to also ask at the end to get a date. Excuse me.
Sorry, Judy.
Gordon?
Can you hear me okay?
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? No one can hear me.
I can hear Gordon.
Maybe, is everyone else having trouble hearing?
No.
No, we
So
can.
I'm the only
we're
one that
fine.
can't hear Gordon?
You have me selectively.
Okay. Then I better log out and come back in.
Can you hear me now, Judy? No? How weird. How about now?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay. I just spoke with Laurel. She apparently wasn't notified that the order of online versus in person was changed and was at the district office when I spoke with her 5 minutes ago. So she is turned around and is driving home and asked that we hold the meeting till she can join us. So I think we need to do that.
Yeah, I too was uncertain about it till like 5 minutes before.
Yeah, I mean, I emailed you in this afternoon, Judy, because I wasn't certain either. So
Yeah, I responded. I probably should have responded all then. I guess there was confusion.
so I would guess it's going to be like 10 minutes or so, but
Okay. Shall we come back in 10 minutes?
sounds good to me.
Hey, Laurel, I got all confused too.
I'm not confused. Nobody told me.
I think Lisa, I'm sorry that you weren't informed. It went in the notice and then in the text, and I probably should have just confirmed.
Oh, I didn't, I mean, I had to ask because I thought we were meeting at 5:30 in the par room as well too.
That's what we were told.
It'd probably be helpful if everybody got their phone out and checked and see if they got a text at 4:15 to make sure we have everybody's correct phone
I
number.
did not get a
because if
text,
you
and
didn't-
Judy has my email, and so does.
I
I know,
didn't
but
fix
Lisa,
Yeah.
And so does
sent
Lisa.
it.
Yeah,
Well-
I didn't get a text until I asked.
Because I got one at 4:18, so I think.
Well, they like
maybe,
you, Alicia.
No, nobody likes me, Laurel. Come on, I've come to grips with that. If we could all just verify, maybe right now, text Lisa your phone number. I just don't want it to happen again. All right.
She has my phone number. She could have texted me. She did not.
Well, no, she did text everyone, and I think there's a screw up, so I just want to make sure it doesn't happen again.
It didn't happen.
So- Okay.
Okay, are we ready to get started? Let me just see. We have Gordon, are you there?
Oh, wait, I do have that text, but also I was working and I'm having an assessment of my house. So right now, which I'm not at, my partner's doing. So getting that at 4:19 is not appropriate.
Well, we'll work to have it earlier then. I'm really sorry for any inconvenience, and so.
Inconvenience is not it. Disrespect is it.
Okay, so we're on to Gordon. Maybe I'll text him. Great. Okay, I think we have everyone here. Excellent. So we have 2 items on the agenda, and the first is to review and discuss the parameters of the superintendent contract agreement. And I think we have Christine Nesbitt, and we also have a document that Gordon sent. I think you sent that to everyone, right, Gordon? Yeah. So Christine, do you want to talk through the components?
Hi,
Thank you.
everyone. I sure can, yeah. And if you'd like, it may make sense to screen share as we go through it, because then you can see kind of the base agreement that we've got, and if there are any major concerns. Alternatively, I can just summarize the base agreement for you. What is your pleasure?
Laurel?
I'm trying to understand why Sydney's here for this part.
Because
I
we,
just want to know, because I thought this all went with our superintendent search, and this would be something separate from that.
Well,
Because she would be having privileged information about what we're doing right here that none of the other people that are applying would have.
well, it's all in the same, it's a contract template that she actually has. So, because it's her contract. So I don't think we're doing anything confidential.
The decision, so we're not coming to a decision at any point here. We're just, I don't know why we're here then.
So everyone understands what's in the contract and agrees to, sees what the terms are. So we know what we're going into. Maya.
Maybe we could reverse the order of the agenda items, and then we wouldn't disrupt Sydney's schedule, and she could stay for the first part and check out for the second part where she's not necessary.
We could for sure, but this is a public meeting, so any candidate could be tuned in watching. It's not like we're in executive session. So this is definitely a public meeting.
Right, but it might also feel awkward for her to be sitting there while we're discussing this. So I don't know. It's just a suggestion.
We can let her, that's great. That's fine. She could decide if it feels awkward. I mean, anyone can be watching.
But not anyone can participate. So it seems to keep this equal and fair, we have it separated. That seems logical to me. It doesn't mean that, I think it just, the optics don't look correct.
Okay. I think,
Lisa, will you move me in as an attendee?
Thank you.
okay.
All right. I'm assuming we're proceeding then with reviewing this contract.
Yes, please.
So I will, what is your pleasure? Do you prefer to read it as we go? It is about 8 pages long. Or do you want me to summarize it? I think it might be good if I viewed it so that, or if I screen shared it, and then you can see the template.
That would be great.
Okay. All right, so what you have in front of you here is the superintendent contract that we have used for Dr. Balderas, and it's substantially similar to Sydney Vanderkaar's as well. The first component of it is the term of the agreement. And this agreement provides for a 3-year term, which is automatically renewed at the end of each year, unless a prior notice is given. So, for example, if this term would go from July 1, 2022 to July or June 30, 2025, and continue on unless it was non-extended. Okay. So in other words, if the superintendent, and it could be either party could give a notice to not extend. And if the superintendent elected, for example, to not extend, then by like June 1 of next year, then the contract would terminate June 30, 2025, because that 3-year term had not yet been extended. On the other hand, if the superintendent had notified the board on June 30, 2024, that the superintendent elected not to extend the contract, then the contract would terminate on June 30, 2026. Does that make sense? So it's a rolling 3 that can only be kind of, you would need to give notice of non-extension if that's what you wanted to do. I see.
Gordon has his hand up.
Christine, I have a question, but if you think it's easier for you to just go through it and us to save questions for the end, I'm happy to do that if that's easier.
Yeah, if that's okay, Gordon,
Sure.
that might be easier. The other piece that I think is there's a discussion item here, and I want to call this out. Some districts, instead of approaching it this way, they just do the 3-year agreement, and then they say, and the board will, the board will need to affirmatively extend it rather than something else. So that's another approach. I think this is the way we've done it. So there's that is why you're seeing this written up. However, I'm happy to write up a term in the alternative if that's your pleasure. The benefit of doing it another way may be, you can have more, it may allow for a more graceful exit if that's your desire. So, because the contract would just expire of its own accord. Okay, you wouldn't have to take an affirmative action to end it. So on the other hand, kind of got to weigh that out. All right. So that's a discussion item we're going to come back to. The duties of this are identical to I have not exactly cross-checked this with the, not every single word with the Superintendent Vanderkaar's contract, but I believe this to be that language, and it was the exact language that Dr. Balderas had as well. So this just establishes the duties of the superintendent, what the superintendent is supposed to do. This is relatively standard language. We can absolutely come back to it. Would you like me to read it to you? Anybody? Just please raise your hand. Don't be shy. Okay. I'll give you a minute to glance at it. Okay. Okay. And I want to call out, this is fairly standard stuff. This isn't where you would put goals for the superintendent or anything like that. That kind of thing needs to be worked on mutually in, by October or so. Compensation. This is an item where I think you guys need to decide kind of what the overall range is, or at least give the negotiator some guidance here based on, either what prior superintendents have made in Eugene School District, what the market is telling you, that kind of thing, so that the negotiator has some guidance. I would recommend talking about it perhaps in terms of total compensation, because things can move around depending on the priority of the finalist. However, I will say that, and I don't have the base. If anybody else has the base and wants to call that out, you're welcome to. I think, I apologize, I can't remember what Sydney's base is.
This year, I think it's 231.
Okay.
31. I think it
Okay.
was last year it was 220, I believe.
Right. Okay. And then the longevity increment, really what this is to recognize someone either for staying a certain length of time, or it could also be treated as like an experience step. So it's not necessarily a part of every superintendent contract, but this has been in ours. So that would be something, and you would want to normally you reach a top step, right? You reach, if you do have an increment or a provision whereby the contract is increasing over time, you do reach a top at some point. So this isn't like an automatic annual guarantee of COLA, okay? I put a comment down here for discussion because there is not an automatic COLA in this template agreement. So that might be something that you would want to consider. It would look something like, you know, if a COLA adjustment is, it would look something like, you know, effective next school year on each July 1st thereafter, the superintendent's base salary and any longevity increment would increase by the amount of the cost of living adjustment provided to district directors, if any. So that allows, another way of addressing this is each year you can address it. Tax sheltered annuity is often a very sought after provision. You could, our template is structured in terms of an increased levels of tax sheltered annuity over a period of time, but an alternative would be to provide for the duration of the contract. Monthly insurance contribution in the amount provided to the district directors. I want to just comment on that. When we've done something different than that in the past, it really is a challenge administratively. You have to set up a plan, an entire different plan for that person. So I would, I can hear the human resources people saying, please just keep that part simple and negotiate in other aspects of the agreement. Oh, the auto allowance. This says $650 per month. I'll just blank that out. That's something you guys need to talk about. The district also provides a cell phone. They just provide a district issued cell phone to the superintendent or a monthly reimbursement for the personal cell phone in the amount provided to district directors, which is $75 a month. Membership dues, this is pretty standard. We want the superintendent to be, you know, a vibrant participating member of educational organizations. And so that's normally covered. Moving allowance, if this is an issue, depending on the finalist that you select, you'll want to, you can anticipate that that will come up. And so that's something that you may want to consider. I would provide direction now about what would be an acceptable, you know, not to exceed amount, because that's a one-time expense, and it's really not, it's not an ongoing, expense. So it's kind of a one-off. You need to figure that out. And I'm kind of going through just the main highlights here. This provision provides for contract time to attend conferences and participate in statewide or national programs. Section 7 relates to the days of service, which is 260 days of full regular service, subject to vacation. Vacation is in the amount of 30 days. You could be something else that you decide if you wanted to change that. And it says, and it's earned on a ratable basis or ratable basis of 2.5 days a month. The superintendent is credited with the full number of days at the beginning of the contract year, which can be used before them being earned. But in the event the employment is terminated, then unearned sick leave will not be available, be reduced from the employee's paycheck. And wherever possible, by the way, I changed the template so that it was gender neutral. Carryover of vacation. This allows a superintendent to carry over 32 days of accrued but unused vacation from one contract year to the next. And then there's a payout provision at the end of employment that the superintendent could be paid out, not at the termination, I apologize, during the employment year. This contract allows for a 13-day payout of unused vacation during the contract year. That provision hasn't always been in our contracts. Payout at termination is up to a maximum of 32 days, and that's consistent with what district directors would get. There's a limitation. The superintendent is supposed to spend their time on district activities and to avoid outside activities that interfere with superintendent duties. However, they can engage in other activities if they provide notice to the board chair. This is on the evaluation provision. This is fairly standard language. The board is expected to evaluate the performance, and if you determine that performance is not satisfactory, then you must describe it and make recommendations for improvement. Professional liability. This provision covers indemnification. So in the event that the superintendent is acting within the course and scope of their employment, the superintendent is provided a defense and indemnification against claims made, but against the superintendent. Termination. This is a really important piece to just consider. The terms of our standard one include a mutual agreement. So you can terminate by mutual written agreement of the parties. I've highlighted, or I'm going to come back to this italicized provision in a minute. Another provision is for cause, that if the board determines that the superintendent for just cause, which includes the reasons by which a teacher or licensed administrator could be terminated by statute, that those are the reasons by which the board could move to terminate for cause. And then there is an agreement in here that any dispute over the termination would go to arbitration. The contract can be terminated for disability. Again, pretty standard language, and by resignation of the superintendent upon 90 days notice to the board. And that's something to think about too, whether that's enough time for you. And then, of course, it terminates automatically upon death. I'm going to come back. This termination without cause. Some contracts include a without cause provision. They're often paired with a balloon payout at the end, but you see that in the private sector, but those are prohibited in the public sector as to school executives, that is. So, and more recently, what the state of Oregon legislature passed was a law that said, look, if you do have a without cause provision, then you still need to give the superintendent at least 12 months notice of the termination. Something to think about. This I just put this in because of the new law on this subject, and something for you to think about, and we could talk about it more if you want to come back to that. If you don't say anything about it, I would just delete this provision. The rest, I believe, is fairly standard. There's a notice section, modification. Yeah, the rest is extremely standard. So yeah, with that said, Gordon, I know you had a question and looks like Maya has her hand up.
I have a few questions, but I'll ask them one by one so people might. And so my first is about the termination language. And what I'm really thinking of is like kind of fundamental policy disagreement, like that. I forget which district it was that fired their superintendent because the board was against masking mandates or something like that, and the superintendent supported it. So personally, I think that's a terrible reason. But if it was the reverse and our board was for masking mandates and we had a superintendent who was acting against that, to me, that feels like it doesn't meet the definition of cause. It's not like gross negligence or doing something illegal like that. But I would want to retain the ability to do that. And so I guess partly my question is does that just have to be the category of without cause, or is there some category of policy differences? And then secondly, the 12 months notice, does that necessarily mean the person has to stay in the job for 12 months, or just that they have to be paid at least for that time?
No, I mean, it's intended to mean that they stay in the job for 12 months. But this is where you want to, these things are paired, and these things are paired with the very first piece that you saw, which relates to the term. So if you're looking for more flexibility, one of the features of this contract is that the renewal, it goes for 3 years. So it will renew automatically at the end of the first year. And so some places may want it to renew automatically, maybe only at the end of the second year. Some places may want, if as the board as a whole is looking for more flexibility in this area, I think the thing to do would be to just tell me, and I will come up with a solution for that.
So I'll just say where I'm at, and then I'll let other people weigh in on this. I mean, I would want to keep the without cause clause. You didn't say about the policy thing, if there is such a thing.
May I, Gordon? Excuse me. Yeah. So right now, the way the contract, even without that clause, what this specific contract would let you do would be to end it at the end of to give notice of non-extension. You can do that for any reason.
I understand that, but like if we were
right, but
forbid,
then
we were in year one of a 3-year contract and things really went off the rails.
Sure. Then there's the without cause. You could do a without cause provision. Your example was a little bit complicated for me because the one caveat in Oregon law is, yes, you can terminate, you can end the contract without cause as long as you give 12 months notice. But the big caveat is it can't be for an illegal reason. And it also can't be because the superintendent is following guidelines and directions of the state. So just that particular example just threw me. But
okay,
I think
if there was a different policy disagreement, that just has to fall.
Right.
So for me, I would like to keep the without cause.
Right. And you don't want us to paint the doors blue, and I want you to paint the doors blue.
Or yeah, we want this kind of curriculum and you want that kind of curriculum.
Yeah.
That's all without cause.
Yeah, and so where the negotiation will be is on the length of that time, if that's what the board as a whole wants to do.
This is
one of the things you got to understand is that these are big moves for executives, and they're looking for some employment security. So
yep. So I also, just on the first thing, I would not want to have the automatic 3-year extension, because it feels like we could be 1 year into a 3-year contract and discover something, and then it's 3 years until we could change people. But I also don't want to, assuming that we have somebody who's doing well, I don't want them to be living under like a year by year feeling like they have no security. So I don't know if there's something
Mhm.
in
I-
between that, like that after the, I don't know, after year 2, then it gets, anyway, I'll let other people talk, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Okay. Maya, I see you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, I'm hoping maybe you can scroll down to the termination section too.
Sure.
And maybe this is like a legalese question, but I'm looking at it from a layperson's perspective. So
Sure.
you explained the clause and the reasons for termination due to disability.
Oh, yeah, that's like if there's a disabling condition that renders the superintendent unable to perform the duties even with a reasonable accommodation. So in other words, let's say I don't know, the superintendent maybe has a very severe condition, ends up in a coma for a fairly long period of time and is not expected to come out of it. Like that's not, and that may not be the best example. That's more of an incapacity, but it's it has to be a condition that renders the superintendent unable to perform the job with or without accommodation. So we always grant accommodations for people to perform the essential functions of their job. But if there's, even with a reasonable accommodation, they can't perform the job due to a disabling condition, then this provides the right, an off-ramp.
Thank you.
I think I was next. So I just wanted to clarify that termination piece, whether it's 3 years with an automatic versus, I still think, don't we write in sort of the terms for 3 years, but one way it automatically happens based on getting doing an evaluation, et cetera. The other way is we have to vote on making it happen another year. Isn't it still written in with some security?
There really are, when you look at it, the term clause, there are really two different ways of going about it. Both are completely legitimate. No, the way that we had done it with some past contracts is this rolling method. I think that actually there's some risk for the district in that, right? If there is on the other hand, there can be a termination, or excuse me, it can be for a fixed term, and then the board can decide we're going to affirmatively extend that. And you can decide at what point in, let's say, the 3-year contract you are going to extend that. Are you planning to either automatically, are you planning to extend it maybe by, July of the first year, or will it be July of the second year, or will it be March 15 when a lot of contracts are going through that, or will it be December? So if that makes sense.
Yes, I think it does, but let's say we are going to do it annually. And so let's say we gave a whole year and we realized that by the end of the first year, we didn't want to continue the contract. Wouldn't we still have to give a 12-month notice or not?
Yeah, if you enter into a 3-year contract, okay, and you say this is for a fixed term of 3 years, then if you decide after year 1, wow, this isn't really working out, it's not necessarily, we don't want to go through the just cause provisions of it. You've really got 2 options potentially at that point. One would be to negotiate a walkaway, and the second one would be to exercise the without cause provision. And the without cause provision would say, and you have X number of, you only have a year left. Laurel.
I go for the way we've done it in the past, because really I think the job security of just it, we already have things in place in case something has to change. So I'm always a proponent of start as you mean to move on. We are doing so much due diligence. And so, and then we make this choice and we roll it over. And if anything has to happen, there are things in the contract that can happen. So I think that's what we do, because I like a contract that starts out saying, hey, welcome, and you're here and we want you here. And at the bottom, it says what will happen if you don't, if it doesn't totally work out. But it doesn't, it definitely would be the most friendly wording of contract to have. I believe that must have been what boards thought in the past, that was the best way to go about it, because it does give some reassurance that you're not being heavy or just tentative in your decision making. Thank you.
May I ask a clarifying point there? Just,
Yes.
are you saying because these things kind of pair with the without cause provision, may I ask what your thoughts are on that?
I think we should keep the without cause per the new regulations that surround it, of course. It definitely should be in the contract. I think can be weird in the world. So I think there should be a way out, and I think removing it completely can bind you in scary ways. So I think it should be there, but I think it should, I do like the fact that they've made it it's not quite as easy to just have a disagreement and then get rid of somebody who's dedicated their professional life to this work.
Yeah, and just so you know, we haven't had that clause in the past. So I want to be clear about that.
You've never had
I can't say never, but we have.
You added this to his clause. I thought we were looking at somebody's contract.
Oh, yeah, I put it in italics because it was a subject that needed to be talked about in combination with the term.
Okay. Yeah, I like it, and I think it's.
And maybe you feel like what's fair is not a 12-month notice, but an 18-month notice or something like that. Like, it doesn't have to be all one way.
Right. And I mean, is there any like mediation or arbitration involved? I didn't see that in
Yes.
red.
There's arbitration.
Oh, I see it.
In the event there is a
Yep.
termination for cause.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think, can we add that for no cause as well, or is that weird?
It wouldn't be, well, I mean, I suppose
the balance of it.
Well, if we're looking for dispute resolution, I think we could add a dispute resolution mechanism if there's some dispute over the no cause provision, and if that's what everyone wants.
I like the idea of that, because that gives, first of all, I think it makes somebody looking at this contract see that there's other opportunities besides just, the ones that are laid out, and was it A, B, C, and D? And it gives, I always like room for conversation with a professional entity, and I guess that would need to be written. I would love to hear what other board members think on this.
I have thoughts, but I'm willing to wait if anybody else who hasn't spoken wants to speak to this. Oh, go ahead, Kirti. I'll wait.
I was going to say, I do agree with Laurel on the having just some like good faith that we're not just going to like that we take the professional position seriously, and having some provisions in there that are more supportive of a longer term position. And it's not like so if that does come from like whatever the affirmative piece of it is in the contract. And I do like a dispute resolution, something in there, because I feel like there should be an opportunity for recourse, or at least a mechanism to have a discussion around it, should there be a piece on that. So
Do you mean if there's a dispute over, say, a termination? Because that's what you've got in right now in there. I mean, the normal dispute resolution mechanism is court. So if you have a dispute over a termination, however, in this particular contract, the dispute resolution mechanism would take you to arbitration.
and yeah, so and just to follow up on that, it's like, I mean, right now with a 12-month termination notice, it feels like that's a lot of time to maybe even come to a resolution on things like, like it just seems like a standard practice in the business world is like a 2-week or at will or whatever it is. So I mean, like that to me just seems like such an awkward thing. I don't know if that seems awkward to anybody else on here. But like I would feel really awkward if like I knew everybody was wanting to let me go and I had to be in a position for another year. Thank you for the time to job search, like that's, I guess, on those pieces of it. But like I feel like if there were mechanisms to also see if there were points of reconciliation, it's not something that I would be not amenable to add. And so I don't know if that is something that we can consider. I'm not sure. Or if that's even something that is worthwhile if we are looking at terminating somebody, but 12 months just seems like such a awkward notification period to me. But I guess
but the risk you take otherwise is that you've got 3 years or 2 years and a boatload of performance management. So that's, I mean, that's.
No, I understand, but it's like that, like, I mean, yeah, I mean.
To your question about, building in mediation or dispute resolution, I really advise against that. Mediation it's always an option for parties who are both willing to do it. And so I don't really think it adds any value. And if you're at the point where you're thinking about, it adds value when both parties are willing, ready, and able to do it. But my experience as a longtime employment lawyer is I wouldn't put it in a contract, because the reasons for which you may end up going your separate ways just, may not be fruitful to talk about for the parties in mediation. And so it just adds another potential burden or duty for the district for the board that didn't exist before.
Does it require it, or is it just an option?
Well, I mean, it's whatever you want. You could say at the election of, both part or by mutual agreement, you could do a mediation or something like that. Please don't ask me to figure out the public meetings law provisions on that one. All right.
I think, well, Michelle hasn't spoken either, and then Gordon.
You had mentioned that another option is negotiating a walkaway. So there are multiple options, and then there's also always the option of mediation if it's mutually agreed upon. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So one is that if people think it makes sense, I would be okay saying that the district will enter mediation if the person requests, kind of give it as an option to them, so they have a little more, I don't know, a little bit more control. I mean, as I understand it, we're going to keep, if we keep the termination without cause clause, which I think we should keep, then at any point we could terminate somebody with 12 months notice. And I actually support the 12 months. I understand what you're saying, Kirthi, but if potentially people either might have moved a long distance to take this job or might have to move a long distance to take their next job, and their jobs are on an academic cycle and they might have kids, it feels like it's a situation where that makes sense. And if they feel like you were saying, I don't want to stick around for 12 months in a place that doesn't want me, they can always resign with 90 days notice under that thing. And so as I understand the question of the extension, it's creating a possibility for somebody to kind of like be terminated or leave without officially being terminated, which means there's no ugliness and there's nothing on their record of having been terminated, and they can walk away, you know, in a civil way and without any stain on their record. So I feel like I would like to have that option, but maybe, you know, maybe in the second year to extend, like after a little bit of experience. But, and Christine, my understanding about the no cause termination is that we didn't need it before, and then the state passed a law saying that you can't terminate without cause unless you have this kind of clause in your contract. That was the legislation passed last session.
I think it was just it was just something that there was no kind of point in negotiating it previously, because the typical walk away clause, if you will, or the without cause clause, the typical one in the private sector has a balloon payment at the end. Yes, we're buying you out, but only to this extent, right? However, that's prohibited by law. And so with this new law that permits districts to, they say, you could always have had a walk away clause, but nobody was going to accept it in the past. It may be a more viable negotiating point now, because we're just going to give you a significant amount of notice. So for whatever reason, and I can't explain, you know, where we've been or what other districts are deciding to do, but it's something to consider. It's a legitimate thing to consider.
So just to clarify, for mediation, I think whenever I've seen it, you have to have both parties agreeing. You can't just do mediation unless both parties agree. Wouldn't that be something else?
We could write into the contract that we will agree if the other person wants, if we want to give
So we're already
more reassurance, right?
That's the assumption. Yeah. Okay. Kirthi.
I think this is the last thing I'll say on it. I understand, like, logistically and logically on the 12 months. But I do, and not to be Chicken Little and worst case scenario and all these things, but we all know that a year is a long time. And if it is something like for cause or whatever it is, like, what I don't want to do is also contribute to a hostile work environment or anything else that could, we don't know what cause may be, right? So that's a part of it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Like, I do feel like we have some responsibility for, like, the people we're also overseeing that will be under people. So I mean, again, worst case scenario, like, I'm just saying that's just that I'm like not in that, but I just did want to bring that up there because it's one person, but there's a lot of people under.
I think they can be useful where, you know, there's maybe really a philosophical agreement or really big stylistic differences, you know, and as opposed to, you know, when there's clearer cut misconduct or performance is ineffective over a period of time and notice has been given and those kinds of things, you can absolutely invoke the just cause provision, the termination with cause, and do that.
And then that does not require 12 months, right? Like, we have to go through.
No. It just takes as long as it takes, but I think it can be, in the absence of misconduct, I think it can be particularly burdensome for volunteer boards to engage in extensive performance management. So it's just something to think about. Are there other people who would want to weigh in on this really important piece? Because I'm not sure I've heard from a majority, or if you have flexibility in this area, or if you want it to be the same as it's been, which that's completely fine. You know, I think what you need to be able to give your designee Gordon is guidance, because in the absence of guidance, I mean, this is a really critical piece. So
Maya or Alicia, do you have any, other people have asked questions. I don't know if any feelings about this. Okay, Alicia.
So let me just make sure I'm got the parameters. We're looking at the termination with the 12-month clause.
That's one. Yeah, that's one aspect of it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I agree with what Gordon was saying about it being an academic year, and you know, we have to give people, you give a little, and it's not easy for that year, and there may be reasons you pay out, but we do have that flexibility, and so I think my question to Christine, and this is what I think that's pretty standard. And so when wooing a candidate, shall we say, with a contract, you probably want something a little more standard. And I agree with Kirthi, it's not fun. It's not good. And you have to make a decision as a board, whether that's, I think, good for your district or not. So that's my 2 cents, a little more than 2 cents. I'm good leaving that in, understanding, hopefully it won't happen, and understanding we still have options. I agree that mediation should be both sides. Again, I'm fine putting it in if that's what the candidate wants, but we also have to think, we are the bosses, so they aren't going to be mediating with Christine, they're going to be mediating with us. And do we think that would be effective? They can always ask for it, and we can always do it. But really think about that. We would be committing to it if we put it in the contract. So what if we're not getting along, or what if we, I mean, it could be not helpful. Like I said, always an option, but if we put it in a contract, we'd be tying ourselves to it. Did I answer all my questions? Those are the 2 I remember mostly spinning around. So, thanks.
And you wouldn't control whether that was in open or exec session necessarily either. So that's a tough one. Yeah.
Maya.
I just want to agree that the no clause component should be included in there. I appreciate what Gordon was saying. I think it makes sense to just go ahead and include the language about the mediation instead of, I mean, if the candidate chooses to request that it's withdrawn, that's fine, but it feels like it makes sense to just write in that we will honor their request for mediation. The part that I'm a little bit stuck on is the rolling 3-year. Is there a reason to do that? I mean, it feels to me like it would just be just as easy to, I mean, maybe not just as easy, that does it mean that, like, is the reason because then you'd have to renegotiate a contract? And it's not just written up front with the parameters already in place?
No, I think it's a fair question, Maya. The typical, I think it's because schools are used to it that you see this kind of language, and also because it can be hard for boards sometimes to remember to do the renewal in a timely fashion. And so you'd have to be taking action every single year. So it maybe creates this quality for the employee. Wow, I don't know if I have are they going to extend me? Are they going to extend me? Are they going to extend me? Versus a presumption of, yeah, it's just we're going to continue on. And if there's a non-extension we need to give you for whatever reason, you know, we can do that. You can do that instead. So it's just it's a different presumption.
Okay, so just the reason that you gave for doing it, which is like making sure that we, in a timely manner, initiate that conversation. Could that also be flipped over and looked on as a reason to not do it? Because if we don't pay attention in a mindful way, then that contract will just kick back in anyway, right? So regardless, it's really important that we pay attention to that that moment when we would either need to renew or opt out, right? So like, we don't want to find ourselves forgetting to renew. We don't want to find ourselves forgetting to not renew. So is that right? I mean, I don't know where I fall on this yet. I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably want to set it up for June, you know,
Okay.
a decision making in June or May.
Now, Christine, is this something that's common like across the country, or is this like an Oregon practice? Is this something that is so common that it would feel like a deal breaker for some people? Or is it kind of just a small detail?
No. I do think I mean, it'll be, this may be an area where you want to allow for some flexibility in negotiations, because people can perceive these things very differently. I can't give you an opinion about like nationwide stuff. What I can say is that some Oregon superintendent contracts contain just this fixed term, and the presumption isn't really that the burden is on the board to non-renew. The presumption is that the burden is on the board to renew the contract. So
the contract is negotiated obviously in good faith that under positive circumstances we would continue this relationship. All right. Well, my position regarding that would be to give the negotiator Gordon the flexibility to include that in the. I basically I'm okay either way.
okay.
I would like Gordon to feel that out with the candidate.
I just wanted to know, you said that that a balloon payment is now prohibited. Is that correct?
Yeah, it has been for a while as to school district executive employees, yes.
So that's a reason that something like the without cause would be added.
The without cause provision really is just, it's an ad that you'll see in some contracts that allows an off-ramp that is an easier and maybe less stigmatizing, if you will, or less damaging off-ramp than termination with cause. Okay, so I think it provides flexibility. The downside of it is that from the employee's perspective, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm really only at any time they could give me a 12-month notice, or they could give me an 18-month notice. And so it's to some degree, you've got to balance those interests, right? When you're negotiating, because the employee has interests in security and the employer has interests in flexibility for an off-ramp.
Yeah, it's just difficult for me to wrap my head around, oh my gosh, I only have 12 months, because it's a long time.
It is, but if school district hiring is on a particular season, right. Those jobs are not not as plentiful, and it's not like you can go out and get a superintendent job tomorrow.
Yeah,
it's not you have to move your entire family potentially. And so.
Right. Yeah, so it's not an arbitrary
Mhm.
amount of time. Yeah, I like the flexibility of it.
I just want to say that I think that I would go for the 3-year rollover. I wouldn't get stuck if everyone else wants to go the other way, just because I think it communicates a message. I think we have the same options either way we do it, but by going into it with good faith, like we would like this to work and be a long-term commitment, it just communicates that kind of message. But I'm actually okay to be flexible, but I'd rather go into a contract so someone didn't feel like they were sort of on trial for the beginning. That is just sort of a how we communicate that. And then I just want to point out that we're at 6:47, so we could finish this. I think we probably need to talk about compensation then too.
Yeah, and frankly, if you have the without cause exit ramp, then it's maybe less critical that you have the other piece. So you can more readily enter into a rolling contract. Kirti?
I'll be quick. I agree with Judy, and I'm good with giving actually Gordon flexibility on if that's something that actually is like helpful in the negotiation process. Like that's cool. I did want to say this on the mediation clause. I am really loath to commit people who I don't know what the board is going to look like in 3 years on those things in a contract that is for a superintendent. And like, we have no idea, like this is not a paid contract for any of us. Like we're not getting paid to do this job. I don't want to actually put terms and conditions that tie any of us and commit us to legal actions that take place in a future setting that may or may not happen, or commit anybody else on their behalf. Like I don't feel particularly comfortable with that. I'm okay with like a mediation clause if there's something in there that's like we would be consider that like with a mutual agreement from the board, whatever, like, so I'm cool with that, like options on there, but like it seems unfair to people who aren't going to be like, I have no idea what the board will look like in 3 years if that becomes an issue, or 6 years or whatever, on there. So it just seems, I just wanted to throw that out there. So I'm happy with options on there. I just contracting it and committing us to something like that seems awkward.
Laurel, you might, Laurel.
The language I liked, and I think a few people said it was the opportunity for mediation. So I like to give the opportunity for discussion. But if they don't want it, we're not gonna like hold their feet to the fire.
What if you don't want it?
Or our feet to the fire. Like,
well, I think the district should be able to show up for mediation. We're an idea and a big thing. We're not an individual that is perhaps has 7, it may not be everybody that.
yeah, I mean, just clauses mutually agreed upon or whatever, like something in there that's not like just committing someone to an action.
I think that the part that scares me around that is that we have a history in our district of things just disappearing and things not getting addressed. We have a very rich history of that. So it concerns me. I'm mostly giving recourse to and have something in the contract for them to say, I want to have a discussion about this. It may go nowhere, but I think the district should have the ability to just say, I don't think so, because we're already the one doing the no cause or whatever, or cause. I can't remember where I'm at right now. So I think that's the reason. The ability to say, I'd like to have a discussion about this that's the individual giving them a little bit more power. That's what That's what concerns me, because I hear pretty much weekly about complaints that are ignored. Nothing happens with them, and just scared parents and such. So I'm trying to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen in this realm as well.
Can I just say, I of course will do whatever everybody wants. But and I don't know that we need to have this or don't. What I'm just thinking is, if this is something that would be important to an applicant because they want a reassurance that there's a kind of due process when they get to some point, which I could see that being important to some people, then I think it would be good to have the option to give it to a candidate if it's important to them.
I'd be like, okay with that being like an option if that's the thing on there, like, but I mean, like, I'm not gonna like die on a hill of contracting. Like, I just mostly wanted to bring that up as it just seemed awkward.
Maya.
Well, when it's put that way, I don't want to die on the hill either. However, I feel kind of strongly in the opposite direction. So I think that leaving it at, like the other things, up, flexible, and leaving it to Gordon to feel out is where I land. I just, the way that I look at it is I have to, I try to think about it and replace the position of superintendent with any other position in the district. And I wouldn't want to deny the agency of any other person, employee, to request mediation and to have it be honored. So while I can understand that it might put a burden on a future board, I'm comfortable with that burden because it's not promising anything, correct? Christine, it's not promising an outcome, it's just promising a willingness to go into mediation. Is that correct? But mediation doesn't mean that it's a binding mediation.
My worry for you is that it could end up requiring you to conduct something in an open public forum that is really not going to be effective at all. And that's the worry that I have for you. It's just without being able to foresee all the possibilities there. We can say it's going to be an executive session, but I'm not sure I would have to think through whether that's actually workable. In any event, employees typically have the right to take something out of the executive session if it's about them and their contract. So my concern is that you would be forced into potentially a public forum that is a bit of a circus, and that would really be my concern. And that's where I think my personal leaning and it's a policy decision for you. That's all I'll say about it. I can only warn you what I think could be an unintended consequence.
Okay, could we make the request that it be looked into so we have a little bit better of an idea?
Well, what do you
I
mean?
don't mean like immediately, but just, I guess we will be starting negotiations sooner than later.
I really think that I would encourage you guys, no superintendents, I haven't seen any superintendent contracts that have a mediation clause at all. Okay, so we're spending a lot of time on something that I think is really, really, really small. And what I'm needing to hear, I hear, if I can summarize, I've heard Laurel, Maya, and Gordon say, yeah, we're okay with requiring it. I've heard, no, I want it to be mutual from Alicia and Kirti. I'm not sure where Judy's at, and I'm not sure where Michelle is at.
Well, if we include it, I'll answer that. I would want to be mutual because I don't think mediation ever works unless it's mutual, number one. Number two, I don't think not putting it in the contract precludes anyone from asking the other party for mediation. I think anyone could always make that request, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you can even say that either party can request it, but it won't happen unless you both agree. You can even say that in the contract if you wanted to. So if we can close this subject, that would be good, because Michelle, you're the only one. I'm not sure.
You had stated previously that mediation is an option at any time, and I will take that to heart.
What I mean by that is, if a person can always ask, the fundamental question is whether you want the board to be required to engage in it at the employee's request.
I think that that's reasonable.
Okay. Okay, I've heard 4 of you say that the board should be required then. Okay. I can draft up language accordingly.
Is everybody, oh, Judy, just one more wrap up on this. You posed a question about it being in public or private. Are you guys all comfortable saying go for it without having the answer to that? I'm just curious for my fellow board members.
I mean, like I said, I don't care enough at this point. Like, that's awful to say out loud, but like, I feel like it's going to be, if we're subjected to that situation in any case, it's already going to be a not good situation. So I think that we're going to have to deal with fallout one way or the other. So we'll just add it to it. I mostly just feel awkward committing people to things that are legal.
And my point is just, we posed that question, but Christine said she couldn't get us an answer. So I'm not sure if my fellow board members want to think about that, put the option for that in Gordon's back pocket. I
can tell you,
I'm just curious.
I can tell you right now, I do have an answer. I mean, to the extent you guys in mediation are talking about, well, why are you choosing to not, not to go down this off path? Well, your performance has been a little lackluster. It hasn't reached a level where, this or that. I mean, I think that kind of conversation, it could be in an executive session, but at the employee's election, it could be in an open session. If it's about, well, we have a philosophical disagreement over you don't want to paint the doors blue and we want them blue, that I don't see as appropriate for an executive session at all. And so that's just going to end up, I mean, I don't see the basis there. If it is, it depends on how it's structured as well. But I think you got to be aware of the possibility, depending on how it's structured, depending on what chain of events happens, there are pieces of it that could end up in an open session. Just depends.
Laurel and then Gordon, and then let's maybe move.
Okay.
on.
So my thought is to allow Gordon to, for this to be brought up if it's an interest to the to have it in the contract. If it's not, it's all a moot point. If it is an interest, then we would be able to find out why and what that would look like. Because the reality is perhaps this isn't even an interest to whoever is chosen.
I would suspect most likely it's not, because this is just not something executives are going to care about.
Okay, so let's just allow that to be something that can be brought up in a subject and not tie Gordon's hands in any way. And then if it is just, I would say the answer would be to that the board would need to have a discussion and to find out the legal parameters around it. And if that and a superintendent would understand why that needs to happen. So we wouldn't have to even explain why that has to happen. So, but like Christine said, it may not even be an issue. So there's that.
So that's a good summary. Are you good with that?
Everybody's saying thumbs up. Woo, good, we got there. So
I think is the next item that we need to just talk about is compensation. Is that the next big one? Just our parameters.
Yeah, and we can walk through walk through the other pieces, like is vacation, which is also an aspect of compensation, vacation payout.
So the position description was advertised, I think, as 220 to 230. And that doesn't necessarily, that's just the base salary. That has nothing to do with the compensation package altogether. So I think we got a spreadsheet from Gordon about current. I mean, that was the data that was collected for 2021. And so we can see where contracts started and where they went. I think it's still in line with the same size districts in Oregon, that range. So are we okay staying in that range? Gordon?
I guess I think it would be good to have the flexibility even to go up to what Superintendent Balderas was earning 3 years ago. And I would not want to pay a permanent superintendent less than what we're now paying the interim superintendent. That seems insulting, and for a difference of whatever it would be, $5,000 or $10,000, I wouldn't want to start a relationship with a permanent superintendent by doing something that feels insulting to them.
I don't want to insult anyone. So, okay, Maya. You're muted, Maya.
I agree with Gordon. I don't need to expand more on it. I'll save us time.
Kirthi?
I also agree with Gordon.
Others? So then I'm hearing the starting offer would be 240, 200, let me just look here. 230, start there, 31.
Not less than 231.
Yeah, no, that's great.
what I
Okay.
meant. Yeah.
Any problem with that? Okay, good.
For clarity, I'm wondering, is that amount the total comp amount? Okay. And so you may just want to frame it as total compensation not less than the current superintendent as the beginning point of the range, and then you still need to figure out the total compensation. And I would do it as total comp because you never know what somebody will value. And so, but you need to kind of identify the upper range.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent everyone a spreadsheet, I think including you, Christine, earlier today. If I didn't, let me know and I can you got it. Okay. So we have the total comp numbers there.
Gordon, what I would say about that is that the 2,000 in professional development really isn't part of the total compensation, because it's more of a we're going to pay for you to go to a conference. It's not a matter that something that the employee takes home. So if they don't go to the conference, it's a moot point.
Laurel?
Can you hear me? It still says, my thing says I'm muted. So, okay, good. I like it. I want to make sure I understand. So compensation usually is the whole compensation package includes your benefits, all of your benefits. Did I miss that? And I can't seem to pull up Gordon's thing right now. I saw it like in a flash during the middle of my workday, but that's it.
It's in there, insurance comp. Yeah, it's in the total compensation.
And it does insurance compensation match everybody else's, or is it the same level, or is it a little bit higher, I guess, for maybe holiday or something? Well, that's not insurance, sorry. For certain points, otherwise everybody has the same insurance.
I would really encourage have the same have the same contribution and the same plan as district directors, because it is really burdensome to do something different. We have done that in the past, and it was just crazy making. And so.
That's the part you said earlier was crazy making?
Mhm,
Okay,
yeah,
okay, that's good.
yeah.
Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah,
I heard the
so-
part you saying, but I was like, what?
just for administrative reasons, and then you can you can have flexibility on other elements, but just keep that one the same as the rest of the organization, or the rest of the maps, managers, administrators.
I mean, I want to give a lot of leeway to Gordon to make this work, and to not, I don't want to, I hate the idea of choosing something here and then, hobbling our negotiator in it in any way. So I feel like we're saying just go for it, but also at the with the correct numbers, what you're saying, Christine.
So do we want to put an upper end on that he'd need to come back to us? So I'm hearing the lower end is 252, 800 as the total compensation package.
Well, it actually would be 250, 800, because that element includes, the,
Oh, professional development.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Also, that was for this year. So, we're in a year of 7% inflation. I don't know what inflation is, but we're in a year of significant inflation. So I would think the base would be that inflated by whatever the appropriate CPI is.
You might consider an escalator of 4%. It's up to you.
Because that's what
That would be consistent with licensed staff.
I'm sorry, Laurel, and then Maya.
No, I'm good.
I would very much like for us to, definitely give Gordon room for flexibility, but really lean hard towards having comparable benefit compensation as to the other folks in the maps. I wouldn't be comfortable considering we're in the salary component, we're already way higher, and it feels as though it feels like including somebody as part of a team versus holding them separate.
So do we want to put an upper end on it that he would have to at least come back to us? I think that's commonly done. We know our candidates and sort of the general experience. It's not like we're getting someone with 15 years of experience, so.
What?
Well, usually we give a range.
Rude.
What? No, I'm not. I think you go up. That's not rude. It's just a fact. I'm not saying.
No, it's your opinion, and you're just saying it like it's a fact. So.
Well, I think it is a fact. We know how many years of, so anyhow, do we want to do an upper end? Maya.
I trust Gordon to negotiate that.
Alicia.
So let's ponder this upper end. Gordon, you're the guy going in. Would it be helpful? Sometimes I would like to choose an upper end, and then you move the pieces around. I know I've negotiated contracts before when I was chair, and you move the pieces around depending who that person is, and so I would like to do that so I can feel more part of it. And I want to be able to do it quickly, because that's the other thing. So if we do give an upper end, I think we have to commit to a time that we can all come together again. It's public meeting, so we have to notice it. But I'm kind of looking at you, seeing what you're thinking, Gordon. Thanks.
I guess I feel like that might be useful guidance to get, but that I would still, but that if something happened where it seemed like it made sense to go over that, I'd want the option to come back to the board with that question.
That's what I was suggesting. Yeah, Laurel.
So it seems strange to choose an upper end when we do not have like what is the upper end for the West Coast for superintendents for this size of district, or I guess out of a whole state, we're like, I guess we would be like a second tier or something. We're not the biggest, but we're almost pretty big. So that would be helpful to know, have that information in order to, I don't know, the market from when we did this before could have changed to such a radical amount. So to me, to pick to say I want them to come back if it's over 320. So it's a high end, but I also think Gordon has been negotiating for a long time, since I was a child. I'm just kidding, Gordon. I think I'm older than you.
Well, I did send the spreadsheet for the similar sized districts in Oregon, and we could update that immediately. So that was sent. We do.
Okay. What day was that sent? Because I've had several emails every day with not great titles on them.
I will resend it so everyone has it on top.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Probably a week ago.
So that's, I would either like not to put an upper end or to make it pretty up there, because arming them with the knowledge, and also if we have somebody who picks an outrageous amount, that tells us a lot too, right? So if it's just way outside of what we can do, so. Could you let me know, do people generally have, this is public information, right? What people make? I mean, it is for county and city, so I would imagine this is as well. Correct? So they're already going to know in the ballpark of where we're at. That's good.
One possible idea to pick up on what you've said, Laurel, would be to, you could take the districts that are 4 closest or 2 closest in, or whatever, closest in size to us, figure out the average of their superintendents, and then say, Gordon, looking at the same elements that we are looking at, so TSA, that kind of thing, and say, Gordon, you can't go above that average, or you can't go above 5% of that average, or something like that. We'd have to gather the information quickly, but.
We can't hear you, Judy.
I could share my screen. I found it. If people want to see it quickly, I could send it or not.
Did you resend it? I don't see it in my email.
I'm not in, I can resend it as soon as we get off screen, because I'm not in my email and I'm on my laptop. So
what I'm calculating there, though, is the elements that we're aware of put the average of total compensation at 223. And that is significantly less than the amount that you've established as a minimum. So I'm not sure looking at these particular ones will be, I mean, I feel like we've got to be missing something in here, maybe it's the auto allowance. Or maybe we should just calibrate it. If we're missing an element, then we'll use our auto allowance or subtract out. So there's a more apples to apples comparison.
An upper end would be what, 265, 270?
It's whatever you choose.
I just don't see the necessity of having one at all. So that's my choice not to have one. I trust a negotiator and I trust a Harvard educated and experienced individual.
Well, I think we should give guidance at least to follow the state, give them some, because we are also, these are public funds and I feel like we are all accountable to what we pay and it is public and I think we just have to have some accountability. It's not a matter of, it's just having some guardrails. Maya.
As somebody who is willing to leave it to Gordon, I would love for the folks who would like to put an upper limit on to throw out the number so we can start talking numbers instead of start continuing to talk abstract. Basically, I don't have a number because I was going to leave Gordon to do that homework.
Let's see, Kirthi and then Gordon and then.
I don't really have an upper limit either, but like for people who are looking for parameters and also trust Gordon, but like, are we looking at things like maybe don't double it? Like, I mean, I don't know, like, is that the level of kind of things? Like, I'm like, what kind of parameters like would make people comfortable on here? Like in order to just get this, you know, I mean, I mean, like in even percentages, like, you know, that kind of thing, as opposed to like ranges, like of like actual salaries or something. Like, I mean, in order to just like put it like maybe 100% increase is too much, you know, like those are guardrails. 75%, I don't know. I mean, like, I was just like, this is
Then in
weird to be
percentages,
here.
like 10% above the high limit or something, and we just have to figure that limit. Like he could have that kind of flexibility.
Just a suggestion. I mean, I don't.
Let's see what Alicia has to say.
Okay, I was promised there would not be any math today, so I'm a little disappointed. But here's my thing. I have a responsibility. I'm one of 7, and I trust Gordon. He's not gonna, I mean, we're already at the high end, so I'm not too worried he's gonna go crazy with it. But I just feel like it means that we take our responsibility and we don't just go, here's one board member. So I am fine with it would be very generous if you did something like 10% above after we figured out the top 3 the 3 comparable districts close to us, we can go 10% over that. I think that's probably way more than Gordon's gonna need. But it does make us say, you know, we thought about it. We didn't just go out there and offer, you know, put him out there. So I would just hope if we could do that, if you guys are comfortable with that. We have to trust our negotiator, I do. And I think he'll get us the best deal and he'll get us a candidate. And I think 10% over, we'd be the higher district with around anybody. And we'd still be doing our due diligence and our fiduciary responsibility to the district. So maybe if everybody could be okay with that, we could move on. But if you're not, and you want to just say, here you go, buddy, I'm okay with that to get us moved on. Thanks.
Oops, Gordon.
I'm okay with whatever people want to do, including that. I just wanted to, maybe you explained this, Christine, and I didn't hear it about that there's a reliable way to adjust the numbers in this spreadsheet to what we think reality is.
Maybe yes, there is. My concern, I guess, is over what timeline. So as I've thought about this, you know, you may want to just look at a percentage, like, you know, here's our baseline, but Gordon, over a 3-year contract, this shouldn't increase the baseline by more than X percentage. And that might be allocated in the very first year. It might be allocated later, you know? So what do you think about that?
Maybe I'm confused. I'm just not sure what,
A
like, looking
growth,
at the
look at
spreadsheet.
a growth factor, like the compensation.
No, I don't mean the growth. I mean, even the starting number. I'm looking at Judy's spreadsheets where the number for our district is lower than we know. I thought this is what you were talking about before, like, are we missing auto or are we missing something else? Like, you think there's a reliable way to adjust those numbers to what we think is accurate? To get comparators that work?
There is a reliable way, it's not a fast way. And so that's the problem. If you want this to be done more quickly, I don't know that that's achievable. I don't, because it's going to take reaching out to every individual district, looking at all of the elements of their superintendent contract, putting together a spreadsheet. And we're good, but we're up against the cooperation with other districts. So I take back my suggestion on that.
Well, let me ask if people would be comfortable with an alternative that is trying to do the same thing, but kind of in a quick and dirty way, which is basically like, if we look at 220 and we know our 220 figure was really 231, and we say, well, let's just inflate all the numbers by whatever that percentage is, which is a very, rough and ready way of doing it, but might be better to do. I mean, I also don't want to take a long time to collect all the data you were talking about.
Maya, I like that idea.
Well, I was going to say the 10%. I was happy to hear that thrown out because it feels tangible. But if somebody wants to figure out the percentage that Gordon suggested, I support that as well.
I meant 10% above what we think. What I'm talking about is the starting base, what we would consider the base, that 10% would be above.
Okay. Then I think 10% feels reasonable, and then I would support that. But I do think we should call him sir instead of buddy, because we want to project professionalism, right?
Laurel.
So if it's above the base that we've set, 10%, is that what I'm hearing? 10% above the base that we set? That seems low to me. What is that amount? That seems, it doesn't seem like a lot of negotiating room.
I thought it was 10% above the average of the highest three. I don't know.
But
yeah.
So what I heard with that was that it would take time to do this, and we want this to happen quickly, soon, so we can hopefully vote on it at our next meeting. So what, am I right? Isn't that what you were saying? It would take a lot of time to figure that out, Christine?
Yeah, there's no way we can get all the details and of that other superintendent of 8 other districts superintendent contracts in this amount of time. And I also don't think it's necessary, because what we know is that that the Eugene School District already is paying a very robust amount for the superintendent, as it should. But I don't think, like, I'm concerned you may not, if you're talking about your baseline salary, I thought you guys already established that. And the only confusion is, for me, is what's the escalator for inflation? Because that's the baseline. And then the question is, what's the maximum amount of growth? And that's where you've been, I'm hearing you struggle with, we're just going to trust Gordon on that, or do we want something more certain? And so, either answer is fine, but just to bring it home, I think the base contract is, I already heard you say, it's going to be the amount that is no less than what the interim superintendent is making right now, plus an amount adjusted for inflation. And I don't know whether that's, since we don't have a full inflationary year, I would just suggest going with the 4%, things that you can't just pick a month out of the hat. But you could also go back 12, there are different ways of doing it.
Okay, so then I vote. I mean, I vote for this baseline plus 15 or 20%. And then I think that's plenty, because it's very rare anybody would go outside that amount. Especially in negotiation, if you start with that amount and offer, I think it'd be really extraordinary if it went above that. But I also do not want to hamper or limit unnecessarily. So that's why I say just let's make it a little bit more of a percentage. And I think that gives governors, but it also allows for a little bit more space.
Kirthi or Christine, your hand was still up and you were in line? Okay, Kirthi.
I was just, I don't know if I'm seconding that or what, but like Gordon, I was okay with your formula and I understood it also to be like your quick and dirty formula. And I also understood the top range to be from the highest range and 10% above that. So if that is amenable to people, I feel like that is doing Alicia's like fiduciary thing. It'll do the like, it'll average out to whatever the 15 or so many percentages above the base, which is what Laurel is trying to get to. And it's still putting us in like some sort of a formula on there and giving Gordon parameters to work under. Does that like, does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Yes.
Did that make sense? Like, does the algorithm make sense to like how I said it out loud to?
Yes, you said it. I think you summarized
Okay.
it beautifully. Thank you. And great. Okay, are we all in agreement then? Gordon, you're really clear about where you're going with this.
Well, let me just say it, and then people can tell me if I have it clear. My understanding is that our bottom is last year's total package inflated by 4%, that it can't be less than that. And the top for the starting year is 10% above the average of the 3 highest paying districts on Judy's spreadsheet, which we will adjust those numbers in a quick and dirty way, assuming that each number is adjusted by the same amount we know ours is. Is that right?
Yes. Okay. All right. So we should maybe move on to our next agenda item. Anything else we need to resolve, Christine?
I assume he'd have that the existing language on vacation is acceptable to everyone. And I think the other parameter is moving expenses, if that is an applicable thing. So just for frame of reference, Dr. Balderas was provided up to 15,000 in 2015 for moving expenses.
I'm definitely in favor of putting moving expenses in there if we need them. The amount, I'm not clear what it would take. So would anyone, Maya?
I would definitely like to include moving expenses where we need them and suggest upping the amount by $5,000.
Great. I've seen a lot of head nods, so I think, does that give you that direction there, Gordon? Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, Christine?
Thank you.
Okay. So maybe we could get done, I'm going to be hopeful our next agenda item, I appreciate Maya and Gordon, and I think maybe Superintendent Vanderkar could join us again, since this is a joint committee. And I believe, I don't know if all 3 of you have talked or how you want to maybe share the plan with everyone, but we'll have her rejoin, come back in as a panelist. So just to frame what we're doing, we talked about establishing sort of the membership and the guidance for the committee. We voted to establish a joint committee of the board and the district to work on the North Region visioning. And so, okay. It looks like Maya's ready to speak.
I was going to suggest maybe the best way to go about this is to share my screen so everyone else can see the proposal that Gordon and I put together and shared with Superintendent Vanderkar, and then we can talk through it. Or if somebody else has another suggestion, that's fine with me too. I guess speak up if you don't want me to share my screen, otherwise I'm doing it. Okay. I assume everyone can see this? Yeah. Gordon, do you want to jump in at all, or should I start? I'm happy to let you start.
Whatever you want. You want me to start?
Yeah, we can maybe just share, tag back and forth.
Okay. So basically, the first point is we wanted to distinguish between the immediate kind of mission and focus of the and purpose of the committee and the long range. This was originally established to say we want to have like a broad vision for strengthening the North region as a whole. But the immediate thing that has to be done is to figure out what's the best thing to do for the Kelly and YG communities. And so the way we're thinking of it is like, for now, we want to constitute the committee in order to address those questions about Kelly and YG. And once that's done, the board and superintendent can revisit, do we want to structure it in a different way to have something that will look more broadly at the North region? And then we try to, and then this is designed to be a committee that will provide advice both to the board and to the superintendent. So then we tried to define who should be on the committee, like who do we want to get the advice from, and what are the questions we want them to advise them on. And that part is further down the document that Maya has.
Yeah, I think it's right there under configuration. One thing that to note is that we explicitly state, so there's no confusion, that ultimately it's the board and the superintendent who are the only parties with any decision-making authority. But in terms of the configuration, the only difference from what is in place now, if I'm not mistaken, is adding 2 parents. So for now, as we're focused on the Kelly and YG communities, it would consist of 2 staff members from each school selected by the staff, 1 administrator from each school, 2 parents from each school selected by parents or staff. That's to be determined. They have different types of parent groups. And if there is a need for a vote on any advisory proposals, it would be limited to the members of the committee who are not board members or the superintendent. And one thing to note also is that other senior administrators may attend, but are not necessarily required. And that would be based on the needs noted by the committee on specific topics. If it's going to be about facilities, it would make sense to have the, Kyle Tucker attending, for example. And then we also wanted to outline tasks. Do you want to talk about the tasks?
Sure. So, we tried to think through, so what, if this advisory committee, what do we want advice on? And thought there were 3 main things, both that would be good to get advice, both for the board to get and the superintendent to get. So one is, what is the best thing to do with the funds that are currently available for the facilities needs of Kelly and YG, which I think we don't have a clear number, but we've discussed something in the neighborhood of, I think, $5 to $7 million, but I can't promise, but whatever that number is, one question is, if we have that much money immediately, what is the best thing to do with that immediately? The second thing, are there other things that may not have to do with money that could be logistical or organizational changes that would make it easier for those 2 schools to inhabit the common space in the short term? And then the third question is, whether we should look at allocating funding for Kelly or YG, or in some way addressing the needs of one or both of these communities in whenever our next bond is. So those are the three questions that we thought would make sense to get advice on.
And then in terms of timeline, we didn't put a specific date down, but our goal for this committee is to get input, but also to be able to provide advice, as it's an advisory committee, as quickly as possible. A lot of these issues are pressing, but we would like the committee itself to discuss the timetable. And that's it. So I don't know if you want to, I'll stop sharing my screen unless somebody has a part that they want me to scroll back to. I don't know if you can see hands, Judy, but Superintendent
I
Vanderkar has
should be
her.
able to see hands. There we go. No, I don't see any hands up.
Sydney has her hand up.
Hands up.
Oh, wait. I guess I can't see all the hands. Let me shrink this. Okay, Superintendent Vanderkar.
So thank you for providing this to me this afternoon. I wanted to just ask, do you want to put on here that because it is a joint committee that will need to notice it 24 hours in advance, and that we'll need to record it much like you did when you did the ALMA meetings?
We can put that down, but those are, legally binding things. So I didn't necessarily we didn't include that in the proposal because that's not an option, right? We have to.
Yeah, I had someone who was concerned wanting to know that answer. So I thought maybe if we wanted to put it in there, it might help with people who are already on the committee. And then I also wanted to answer Gordon's question. What's left in the bond, the current bond for the Kelly YG project is around $5 million. So you had a range there, and I was just letting you know that right now it's at a little over 5 million. I don't know exactly what it is. Thank you.
Oops, that's me. I just had one question, and I like that forward thinking. I don't know if this board can commit a future board to what to put in a bond. I don't know if that would be binding. So if when we go out for a bond, it's a different board, does that commitment, do we have that ability to do it? It's just really a question that I don't know the answer.
I could just say everything here is just advisory, right? This committee has no decision-making power. So it might be advice that we say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but obviously, the decision is not going to be finalized until whenever the time is that we get to the bond. So
Great,
that's my understanding.
that helps, yeah. Laurel.
Okay. I love this. This is something that I've been wanting to see a lot more of, is just really to, and the work that I do, community is, and bringing people together in collaboration works. And it moves the needle much further than just leadership trying to move that needle by themselves. And it leaves a heavy lift on leadership to do that all by themselves. And the frustrations tend to happen because it's just not going well. And we know this because we're still in the same place as when I got here. So I really appreciate this. I love the inclusion, but not massive. We're not inviting everybody, but we will have information in a way for everybody to, everyone has voice through, the only question I had is, can there be student voice? Is that allowed? Is there a way for that to happen where it's not like we're not imposing time upon them, since they're not high schoolers or anything. So it could be kind of harder for them than older students. So that's the only question I had, but I really appreciate this. I'm glad there's more voice. And my my question was when Judy said that this is, and just to everybody understand, this advises the board to make decisions. And make sure we're getting information, a more well-rounded information than we had been getting.
Thank you. Kirthi.
If anybody can answer the student thing, I appreciate it. It doesn't have to be right this minute, but please don't forget it.
This just came at an interesting time. I was reading today a process model called Leading by Convening. It was done through the US Department of Education, and actually on looking at how do you drive authentic engagement with community stakeholders to inform education policy. So thank you, Maya and Gordon, for driving this. I did want to ask, like, in order to, I am always this person, I'm going to be this person. In order to move things forward, I was just curious, like, what are, like, are we making a vote on the committee, or are we, like, this was an informative session? I'm still unclear on there, but like, I'm just wanting to know what next steps are.
I think we are voting on it because we wanted to have more detail about membership today. So we would vote on this. That's what we agreed to last time.
Okay.
And I really appreciate you guys writing it up so we can respond to it. That's what we thought would be helpful. So, okay, Gordon.
I was just going to say that I hadn't thought of the student inclusion, but I think it's a good idea. I don't know what, I don't know who the right people would be to include, but I do think it's possible that that students will say, like, no, you got to understand, like, this is what it's like at this time of the day. I don't know, at lunchtime or something, like, just we'll see things that maybe nobody else will see that'll be important to take into account. So I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I think it's a good idea to try to get that input.
Maya?
I very much support adding the students as well. And I would say that it would probably make sense to have the staff select the students, unless somebody can think of another method for doing so. In terms of voting for it, though, my understanding is we already voted to make the committee a joint committee. So this is just voting on the parameters of said joint committee, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And then Sydney, you said to add this to the proposal. Do you want me to include it in writing so then it's shared with other people? Or to me, I just assumed that we would communicate that this has to follow public meetings laws. So because it's not really negotiable, right? Like, whereas how many teachers can be on it is negotiable.
No, that's perfect. We'll just advertise it.
Okay, and then so when we do vote on it, unless somebody objects to it, consider, does it, if we're doing 2 staff, 2 parents, does it make sense to have 2 students? Yeah, okay.
You might consider having 2 from each school.
Yeah, that's yeah, just like with the staff and the parents, so 2 from each school. And unless anybody objects, I would just go with at least trying out the model of staff appointing those students.
Alicia.
Oh, sorry, Alicia. I was just going to throw out one more thing. Maybe you need one from YG. You need one from regular Kelly at the middle school level, and then one from the immersion program for Spanish, and then maybe 5th graders from the YG elementary or something like that. Because you have 3 programs, so we'd want to make sure we represented all 3.
Could I suggest one from the YG program? I think you maybe already said this, but you said 5th graders, so that threw me for a loop. But one from the elementary, one from immersion Japanese at the middle school, one from Spanish immersion at the middle school, and one from gen ed, for lack of a better term, from the middle school. Okay, I will note that.
Alicia?
Got it. So first, hey, thanks. My question last week when we were pushing this forward was, what are the responsibilities of bringing people on? Were there votes that needed to happen, or do they just get appointed? So I guess, I actually am still not clear on that. So the parents are just put forward. We aren't going to have a say on those parents. We just have I think you guys said the PTO, the parent organization will put them forward. Could I just get a nod from you guys?
Or staff, depending upon the school. They have two very different parent groups. So I think that would be.
That's how they're going. Thanks for clarification. The other thing, just throw out this idea, don't have an answer to it, but it's great that we want to include student voice, but we already set the table and we decided what was for dinner and we pointed to their chair. Meaning, I know, Gordon, I got you thinking, didn't I? Mike, it's like, it's kind of an adult meeting and that's great. And there may some people that could do that, but also really just, if we could be creative and say, should there be a subcommittee? Should there be another way that still honors that voice, but really is more of an authentic way, if you will, that students come. And I trust you guys will get creative and so will the teachers. I just want to give you that flexibility when you talk about student voice, that, it's better to go do an assembly. It's, whatever. If you find a different way to do student voice as well, just please do. Thanks.
Gordon.
Maya, do you have something particularly brilliant to say about that?
That puts a lot of pressure on me. I wish I could remember the quote, but there's a quote out there, and I'm not going to remember who it is, but it's something like, students rise to the expectations you put in front of them. Maybe it's children. I think that I'd like to try and see how that works. I know watching the student interviews, they conducted themselves just as professionally as the adult interviews. So until it doesn't work, I think that it would be good to be as inclusive as possible and lift them up to what we believe that they can do. Students, kids, they can be very surprising.
Can I just clarify, Judy? I'm not saying they can't at all. I'm saying there may be a way that is a little more authentic than sitting in a meeting that we could get to that voice. I mean, I've been doing student engagement and this work for years, and smarter people than me have talked about this. And that's all I'm saying is, please, I'm not insulting their intelligence in any way. I think they can sit still and be in the meeting, but will you get what you want? That's what I'm asking. So let's just be creative. I just want to give you that torch of creativity, if you will. That's all.
Laurel.
We have a history of not listening to our students, and they're the ones using the system. They're the ones actively, we're all here because of them. So I find it problematic to say, let's try something else, because they can't handle it really. I want them in the meeting if they want to be. And they are in the system. You don't have to answer to everything I say, Alicia. You've said a lot. I'm saying they should be part of it. And I think we have agreement. And really, it's going to be apparent if they can't do the work. But we have a history in this district. This is why this committee is here, of not listening and restricting voice. So let's open up the voice. And then if we have to, maybe we can become more creative. But let's make sure that we are getting all the voices a chance to tell us, because I didn't hear, and I mentioned this several times, about transgender bathrooms while I was campaigning from anybody in the whole district except students. Nobody mentioned it. It wasn't on anybody's radar as an issue. And we still haven't addressed it enough. So I want that student voice, because they're the ones who will surprise the stuffing out of you.
Maya.
Just like my wheels are turning, and I appreciate you said the word creativity, and that is one of my favorites. So I really appreciate that. And one of the things that I think we can be creative with is not only shifting if needed, which I think is what you're saying, which I really appreciate and gives us leeway. But also, it might be time for us to reimagine how we structure meetings. I think that there's a lot of adults who aren't comfortable sitting in what is traditionally called an adult meeting. So it might give us a chance to reconsider what meetings even look like. So I'm gonna go with that creativity honor and add that to my hopes.
Okay, Alicia?
Thanks. I'm just trying to be as clear as possible, and that's the only reason I want to respond, because I no way want to, and I'm just going to say Maya, thanks for that, because that's where I was going with it. And thanks for the clarification of my intent. Thanks.
So can we make a motion? I don't see any more hands up. So I'm going to ask Maya with our addition of students and the noticing the meeting.
Okay, I move to approve the proposal as presented with the addition of 4 students, 1 YG elementary student, 1 Japanese immersion middle schooler, 1 Spanish immersion middle schooler, and 1 General Kelly middle schooler. And with the notation that these meetings would have to follow public meetings laws.
Do we have a second? Okay, we have Maya moved and Kirthi seconded. Any more discussion on it? Seeing no hands, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, raise your hand. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, then I am going to, I'm going to close the meeting and adjourn the special meeting at 7:52, and we will meet down at the district office. Do people want a half an hour or 20 minutes? Half an hour. Okay, so we'll meet at the district at 7:53 actually. So how about we meet at 7:20? Okay. All right, adjourned.